Apex, believe it or not, in all of its polished glory, has a bit of a problem on its hands, and honestly, it's an incredibly hard problem to fix. What am I talking about? Well, it revolves around hitboxes. What are those, you might ask? Well, if you look at an in-game character model in Apex or any FPS game for that matter, they all have an invisible box or boxes around them, and this defines where they can be shot or hit. Hitboxes usually cover the head, arms, legs, etc. In reality, nowadays it's not really a box shape, but it's called that because many years ago they did tend to be pretty basic box shapes, but these days they're pretty advanced. Why is this a problem in Apex? Well, there are two reasons. The first one is pretty obvious, and that's that the hitboxes aren't as refined on certain characters as they are on others, and this is the easier problem to fix. Ideally, the hitbox should only cover actual parts of the body of the character that you're firing at. Say for instance you fire a shot in between a player's legs. Whoopsie. That shouldn't count as a hit. If you do that to, let's say, Bloodhound for example, it won't hit, which is exactly what you would expect, and I think most players would want. Sadly though, that's not the case for someone like Pathfinder. Pathfinder has a pretty slender shape to begin with, being an android and all, and he's quite a lot of space in between his arms and sides, and between his legs too. Now if the hitbox followed the contours of his character perfectly, as you would expect it to, this would mean that if you shot in those spaces, you wouldn't get a hit, but at the moment, you do. Shooting into these gaps will still grant you a hit, even though technically your bullet should have missed. So compared to his actual in-game character model, Pathfinder's hitbox is huge. You can fire pretty close to him and still get a hit. Hey, well, okay, that's great if you're playing against him, but what if you wanted to use Pathfinder and the abilities that he has on offer? Now, I'm no game designer, but this problem is, like I said, the easier of the two to fix because it mainly revolves around some refinement issues and fine-tuning. I know that it's a separate game, but CSGO, Source Engine, found a hitbox issue years after the game was released and it got fixed reasonably quickly. So I think that with some time, Respawn can clean these hitboxes up and get them 100% accurate. But this thought though brings us on to a much larger problem in general: character sizes. Let me read something out to you that was put together by Reddit user Sir Alic, who's based this information on Suki Spy's hitbox video and images. He's the guy that put this video together originally and found the bigger problem with some of the characters in the game, like with Pathfinder. Great work by members of the community this. So they studied this in-game, and Wraith, for example, her character model works out at roughly 33 square centimeters in size. It makes sense. She's a pretty small character. Gibraltar, on the other hand, is a whopping 79 square centimeters. That is 140% larger than Wraith, with Wraith being the smallest character in the game in terms of size, and Gibraltar being the largest one by some way. Lifeline, the medic, is second smallest, being 12% larger than Wraith, and then it's Bloodhound, Mirage, Bangalore, who's middle of the pack, and then Pathfinder and Caustic before landing back on Gibraltar. Now, why is this a problem, and why is it hard to fix? Well, if you've got an enemy who's playing as Wraith, they're incredibly hard to hit because they're so small. Not only that, but they have abilities that let them move around pretty fast and go mostly invisible, and that's a very strong combination. Gibraltar, on the other hand, is a whopping great big target that of course has no movement abilities at all, and it's so easy for a squad to just focus fire on that character. Of course, you could argue that this is balanced by his abilities. Gibraltar has a personal shield and a dome shield, but honestly, in my experience, his personal shield doesn't really help him at all that much against fast moving opponents, and the dome shield is incredibly situational and mostly a defensive tool used for reviving teammates. Now, I'm not saying it's not useful, but I'm just not sure that it's worth the extra real estate you're giving to enemies trying to hit you. Look at Caustic, for example. He is 105% larger in size than Wraith, and I think he's one of the least useful characters in the game. His gas is annoying and his traps can block doorways and other things, but for the most part in a gunfight he's got no real abilities that can be used in the moment. He's too situational, and I'd say objectively at the moment Caustic is one of the worst heroes in the game, yet he's one of the biggest targets. So he's got weaker, incredibly situational abilities, but a much bigger target. It's also worth noting that every character in Apex moves at the exact same speed, even though it often doesn't feel the case. And this has been confirmed by developers. And what makes it feel like you're running slower is the character animations, the way that the arms and the legs move. They can make you feel slower than you actually are. If you have a race with a friend, you can go and confirm this yourself. And I'm just going to go back to the characters and their abilities. This is a huge difference from any battle royale style game that's come before it. If you look at Battlegrounds and Fortnite as examples, the hitboxes for those games on all of the characters are the same size, despite Fortnite having some crazy skins. They have a different system though, whereby they've got one character model as a base, just with different visuals or cosmetics. Everyone is playing as the same hitbox in effect. And Apex has gone in an entirely different direction. Now let's look at a non-BR game for a second and see how they deal with different character sizes and balancing. What about Overwatch? I think this is a very good example. Let's take Reinhardt. He's a huge tank hero with a massive health pool and a shield. Really slow, but he can take a ton of damage and help teammates move forward to capture objectives. Same with Roadhog. He's a big target, but he's got a big health pool to balance this. And this system works okay for Overwatch though, because the entire game is designed around a team having an interesting composition of players, from aggressive attacking players with less health like Tracer, and defensive supporting characters that can tank more damage like Roadhog. And this asymmetric game design works better with the game modes and short round based objectives that Overwatch has. And yes, characters that you play as in Overwatch also move slower or faster depending on their size. But in the Battle Royale genre though, in BR games, I think that you ideally want there to be a level playing field. That's why Apex decided to have all characters move at the same speed, despite them being either larger or smaller. And this is the main reason why certain characters having a larger hitbox or surface area where players can hit you really needs to be looked at and balanced in a way that players would be willing to play at a disadvantage. And right now, I don't think that's the case in this game. Pathfinder's hitbox will absolutely be improved in time. Yes, and his grapple can be good for teammates, and of course just movement and surprising people. But right now, Gibraltar and Caustic, I just don't think they offer up enough advantages to me personally to warrant their downsides as bigger targets. The question is, how in the world do Respawn go about balancing this? And I've tried to think about this long and hard, and it's very difficult because of the type of game that this is. I suppose that it boils down to the pros and cons of the character that you're playing. For me personally, I don't think that Gibraltar's abilities in this case outweigh his size, pardon the pun. I would still use one of the smaller characters over him. Wraith, Lifeline, Bloodhound, all great choices due to their useful abilities and a smaller size. Would you rather have Gibraltar's shield or a character that can get you out of a jam with a portal or a phase? Or a character that can place down a heal, or one that can detect enemy movements and locations nearby? Much more useful, right? The issue is that if you've got characters that are harder to hit and they offer up better abilities, then why would anyone use the larger ones? And I worry a little bit about this, that the solution for this might be for Respawn to give the larger characters slightly more health. But let me tell you, I'm against that. You could argue that Gibraltar already has this to a certain extent, as he does have his gun shield that offers up 50 damage protection to some parts of his body, but for the most part, I don't think it's quite the same as having an extra 50 health overall, as the shield is only protecting a portion of your body from the front and it's pretty easy to circumvent, not to mention it's only there when you aim down the sight. And I also think that it would be incredibly frustrating, let's say in endgame, if you come up against a character that can move at the same speed as you, wield the same weapons and armor, but also has more base health. Of course, they are easier to hit, but imagine in early game, let's say, if you land on the dropship or Market or Skull Town, just the typical hot zones, and the enemy team has a Caustic and a Gibraltar, and they have, let's say for argument's sake, 125 or even 150 base health, and now imagine that multiple squads are also using those legends. With the limited ammo that you get in early game, it would be a nightmare. The average time to kill of any engagement would go up so much if they gave these bigger characters more health. And I think that you would end up seeing players use those characters just to get that extra base health. They don't care about the perks. And having thought about this, I reckon a better solution would be to offer those bigger characters some smaller advantages over the others, most notably in carrying inventory space. What if characters like Gibraltar and Caustic could carry slightly more items in their backpacks, or to further simplify it, they could stack more items. For example, at the moment any legend can stack 2 arc grenades, but let's say for example Gibraltar could stack 3, or they could hold more ammo in one stack, or whatever it might be, they would have a slight increase in carry space, so they're used as more of a support character. It's just an idea, and I'm not saying it's the best solution. There are other solutions here too, but I don't think they really make sense. Get this, Respawn, if they wanted to, could shrink all of the characters down to the same size. But of course, this is ridiculous and it goes against their original design ethos. Not to mention, it would ruin all of their in-game skins. They'd have to redo all that, their marketing, the promo stuff, the trailers, and just the feel of those characters. It would all need to be redone, so I don't think that's a realistic option. But yeah, it'd fix the problem. So they need to find a way to ensure that the characters here stay the same size, but they have an interesting trade-off. I think this is going to become much more of a bigger issue the longer this goes on, because Battle Royale games tend to get harder as the lifespan gets longer and more cutthroat, because the more dedicated players play more, they get better and they work out how to play the game better, take advantage of each character and their abilities, how to use specific weapons. Wingman. I think most experienced players will avoid the larger characters because of that, while newer players won't really know the ramifications of selecting them and will be easy pickings, and this is going to make onboarding new players very hard. Wrapping things up, it's up to Respawn to decide how much of a problem this is really. Whatever they do, maybe they do nothing, I don't know, but if they do something, what you don't want here is a overly complicated system. I think one of the reasons that Apex has succeeded is because it's simple and easy to understand, and you want players to know that no matter what character they're fighting, they know their health pool and what they're up against. Hit markers show off what armor they have, and audio cues tell you when armor is broken. Ideally, in a BR game, in my opinion, you don't want to add more RNG factors. You've already got that there with the loot. That's the design of the game and the circle. So you want players to have the same options, weapons, health, etc. So I think that offering up a bit of extra backpack space to the bigger guys in terms of what they can stack and then cleaning up the hitboxes would be a good start here. But it's going to be really interesting to follow along with this and see what Respawn do with this situation going forward, because it's not something that we've had to think about really, or game designers have had to think about really, in any other Battle Royale game before. I just hope that they don't increase the health pool, because I think most players would be against that. Fingers crossed, we'll see. But what do you guys think? How much of a problem is this, and how would you tackle it? What would you do? I think it's difficult, but exciting and interesting to talk about. And there it is, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, please. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you didn't, a dislike. Subscribe if you want to see more. Hit that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.